It's always weird, because I know on my phone stuff is different than it does on my computer.
Got it, so we're good.
Cool. Yeah, and if there's a time when you and a couple people want to come, we'll just figure out a good. I think last time I did it took over 2 hours because we lingered a little bit.
Yeah.
It's a lot of walking, but there's a lot to
We
see.
saw the new conservatory.
Yeah, that's right. We did go into the garden. And then the last one I did with Chris and John Pacheco, we went into all the galleries along Gallery Row. Like we went into the Tivoli, we went into the Robert
That was
Tower.
tempting. That was
Oh, I
tempting.
know, but that definitely adds another
Sure.
23 minutes. 'Cause,
It's really nice.
there's a lot of good stuff. So are we ready to start? Welcome to our artist chat for early June with Roman and Alexei. You guys all know about this is the piece we're raffling off tonight, which is a beautiful piece titled Untitled, which we'll talk about later actually. Titling picture. Do you do it? Do you don't do it? This is Roman and Alexei. My goal is for you guys who've been here before. I have sort of 3 phases of these interviews that I'm always interested in, and that's background and context, like even as a kid, how are you kids first exposed to art? You know, was it in your family? Was it around childhood influences? And then influences further on, whether it's famous artists or teachers or whatever, and then the process. How do you do what you do? And I think those 3 things are all sort of interesting in just learning about how artists make work. So, Roman grew up in the Midwest, Iowa and Minnesota. Moved to Las Vegas when you were a senior in high school.
Yep.
Which is kind of a tough time to move.
A little bit.
And your parents are, your mom's a teacher, your dad is or was a principal, right?
Yes, he spent some time as a professor, principal, usually in education.
And they both had family members who were professional artists.
That's correct.
So you had art around you. I mean, the family knew art and was involved in art. You said it was an uncle or a cousin?
I have 2 cousins that are professional artists and an uncle who was.
So your parents encouraged that? As a kid you did art and you read books and that was...
Very much so. It was always around me. My mother, she loved to draw and paint and was, very crafty and always encouraged us for us to museums. So I was exposed and my love for art was encouraged and nurtured very early on.
Now, as a kid, you mentioned when you went to museums, you told me that you would, what did you do when you were a little kid even in museums?
I drove my parents nuts because I would sit there and I would stare at the paintings for hours and hours and hours. And of course, my parents, where they loved art, they weren't quite as obsessed with it as I was. I would sit there and I would look at the old masters and try to figure out how they did what they did and just...
So even from a young age, you were trying to figure out how to do what they were doing, which I think is cool. I think it's also a good reason to bring kids to museums, just because even if kids don't always understand what they're seeing, there's something there that's like, if you've drawn or painted yourself, it's like, how did you do that? So that's a cool thing. And what did you like to draw when you were little? Because you do a lot of people now, you paint a lot of faces.
I've always done a lot of focus on people. I've always enjoyed figurative work, concepts in relation to actual people. But when I was much younger child, I had a short love affair with the fantasy world. I like to paint and draw dragons and all sorts of things from like Greek and Roman mythology.
So you're not working on your dragon paintings now?
Yes.
I think maybe you should do that and see what happens.
It's been about 20 years since
I don't know, I think maybe you should try a dragon and see what comes up. You also, and in high school you took high school art classes. You're not sure the
our
teachers-
teachers had a love-hate relationship with me because I would take the class, but I would never do what they wanted me to. I was in, it was typically, I would do whatever I wanted to do, and I would.
You were one of those
draw.
kids.
Yeah, and they just kind of let me go off in the corner and just paint or sculpt or whatever it is that I wanted to create. It worked. So they were cool once they saw that I was actually being productive and I was, kind of had a grasp on what I was doing. So.
Did you feel like you learned anything from that, or were you really self-taught, do you feel like? Or did you pick up any
I feel like
things?
I'm self-taught. I feel like I learned how obstinate I am.
As well as your high school teachers like that too.
Yes.
You told me that your influences, you do focus a lot on people, and you also like to read about psychology, neuropsychology, how people work, how people think, why they are the way they are. You also have an interesting take on what separates humans from animals, because you mentioned that animals do communicate with each other and they build things, nests and things.
And some people will disagree with me on this, but I feel that there are a lot of things that we actually are very similar with a great deal. The majority of the animal kingdom. I mean, you have animals that communicate one way or another. Animals that build and create things. You have bees, beavers, ants, so on and so forth, birds.
Yes, yeah.
But I really feel that our creative impulse, the desire to create for the sake of creating, to express ourselves, something beyond, just the basic survival behaviors. I believe that art is purely human. Some people might disagree, but
No, it's interesting, because when you said that to me the other day, I was thinking, so animals build things that are functional, but art not being functional and just being as an expression for no purpose other than an expression. I was trying to think if any other animals do that, so I think that that's a really interesting thing to think about, it. A creative expression just for the sake of expression. So yeah, I think that's really fascinating. You told me also your early influences was very much realism. You really studied and painted in a very realistic manner. And who were the artists that you kind of looked at?
Being originally from Iowa, surrounded by all of his work in the museums and everything like that. Grant Wood was a major influence when I was young.
And I think Grant Wood, who did American Gothic, the two farmers staring right out of the, very realistic, very traditional, very realistic and traditional. So you studied that work and tried to.
And Rembrandt.
Rembrandt. It's a good one to copy if you can do. You can copy Rembrandt though.
It was realism. I felt that was something I had to be able to reach. It was something I strive for. And my uncle and cousins, they largely work in realism. I thought that was the direction that you had to go as an artist. Once I reached that point, I felt that it was a great skill to have, but it really wasn't where my creative direction really wanted to go.
Because you painted realist, you sold some realist paintings in your
so
early 20s, like in your.
I started selling. My first show was when I was 16.
Portraits, mostly people again, or different, but very realistic portrait type things.
It was photorealism from my late teens to my early 20s.
So photoreal, like really.
It was obsessive. Yeah, I was obsessive.
It's interesting. So then, and I think, so what made you change out of realism to a more expressive, less photorealist style? Are there things that made that happen?
It really is a combination of things. First off, I felt very mechanical. The joy that I get from art, the joy I get from creating and expressing myself in one fashion or another, I felt like it was taken away by the mechanical, repetition behavior that goes into it. Sometimes I'll bring you know, bits of realism into my work. And, you know, like right now I have a series that's coming out that there's definitely a strong root with realism. So it's not completely gone, it just, I wanted to find different ways of exploring my relationship with art. So I started playing around with this, and it felt like that was the right direction.
Well, and I think other artists, we talked about Picasso, his early work is very classic and varied, and I think it's interesting to sort of really learn how to reproduce realistically. I think that enables you to reproduce what's in your head as well.
Okay.
To, you know, but I think that's definitely a good skill, and interesting how you then go off from that skill into maybe a truer expression of yourself based on knowing how to reproduce. Yeah. That's cool. You mentioned your influences shifted a little bit. I think maybe as you got out of realism and into more expressive works.
Well, my early 20s, I found myself more attracted to works of Otto Dix, largely. But
He's a German painter who, I think you said, after World War I, his style shifted to be a little more dramatic and dark.
More expression space. And also Van Gogh. A lot of people say Van Gogh, but I loved how bold he was, and it, you know, had a lot of potential with strokes and the intensity of some of his work.
Intensity of strokes and color and just everything, just the whole, the intensity of it is what attracted me to that. You also told me your art's been affected by certain personal feelings, emotions, personal losses you've gone through, and that you actually stopped doing art for a few years and tried to be normal. I think it was.
Didn't work out.
Took a normal job for a few years, and did you not do any art for a few years, or how?
There was about 2 years where I stepped away from art. I really wasn't creating. Maybe I do here and there, but I really didn't invest myself in my work for a while. I had gone through some personal losses as well as dealing with bipolar and, you know, a few other issues that came into my life, and I felt in a sense that I needed to make a dramatic change in my life. I don't feel that wasn't necessarily the direction that was best for me, but maybe hiding away from, you know, myself was something I needed at the time. Eventually, you know, I worked some regular jobs. You know, I was management with retail stores. I've gone into mining outside of Vegas.
That's when I first met you. You said that was like a year ago. When I first met him, he was working at a quarry mining place where they mine the rocks that they sell at garden stores, basically. I mean, that was, and you were driving like an hour each way to get to this mine.
Yep.
And you were just about getting ready to, I think, leave it and go back to art full time. So I didn't know the whole background of that.
What
but
happened is you rented that wall right there.
Yeah.
We sold you out
Yep.
off that wall, and then we're like, oh, I'm done. I'm done. I'm ready to quit my job.
So I wasn't sure how well the alternative styles that I was working, I had begun to work in would sell. I knew the realism always sold well, but I definitely did not want to go back into that. So I was invited to set up on that wall that is outside of Twisted Gallery now. And it was very, very, very nervous at first, because like I said, I wasn't sure how it was going to turn out. First Friday, a lot of people, I had a lot of compliments, no sales, so I was kind of nervous. I think like a week later or so, Jana gives me a call, and she has someone that's interested in pieces, and then one piece sells. By the time the next First Friday hits, that entire wall sold. I had to make a whole new set for, you know, the next wall that I rented, and just continue down that road.
So you thought, maybe the universe is sending me a signal that it's time to get back to my art.
Yeah, definitely. It was a very welcome change.
Now, do you feel, does painting help you with your emotional highs and lows? Is it cathartic? Do you remember how you felt when you look at a painting you did a while ago? I mean, tell me about
Definitely.
how your emotions are maybe helped by the painting or how it affects.
I guess it helps ground me. So whether I'm in a more of a depressive state or a high, whenever I feel that, I guess you could say I'm balanced, creating art, expressing myself through that, whatever medium I'm using at the current time, helps me find that balance and just come back to myself. So it kind of quiets the chaos.
So the actual process of painting is kind of a good time for you. It's a joyful or happy time when you're actually painting.
Definitely.
So, and do you feel it's cathartic? Like you get some things out of your system and onto the canvas, or is it not that precise? Is
No, definitely. I mean,
it not that direct, maybe, or?
in a sense, it is. Like when I don't create, when I'm not making art, people who are close to me have always pointed out that I become a pain to be around. I'm grumpy, I'm moody. But when family members and close friends, when I feel like that, they come to the point where they just tell me, you need to go paint.
Would you please go paint?
Yeah. And after that, I come back to myself. I find that balance. I find myself, through the work. I guess it's a form of meditation for me.
And do you feel like the couple of years you took away from it, I think in a way, people could look at that as a waste of time, but I think in a way maybe it was necessary for you to really firm up in your own head what you want and don't want to be doing, maybe.
I tried other things, and I would be excited at first because I'm doing something new, I'm learning something new. This is a new venture that I'm able to conquer, but then shortly after I figured out how this job works and how this works, and it began to bore me. Art's the only thing that's never really bored me. It's the only place that really I feel like home. No matter where I am, what's going on in my world, the bad, the good, I can go to my art. And I had to step away from that to really come to an understanding about, myself in relation to my creation.
Because every piece you do is a different whole new challenge and a new expression.
Oh, definitely.
And we can talk about the process of some of your pieces. You work in a lot of different mediums.
Mm-hmm.
You work also sometimes on canvas, but you also paint on big, heavy pieces of plywood.
Yeah.
So what makes that do certain things on themselves, or is it what materials you have on hand, or?
Sometimes it's what's there. Really, I want to create. That's there. I'll use it. Other times there's specific reasons why I decide to paint on what I do.
Because you build sometimes boxes that you paint on actually plywood, and then so there's a construction element to it as well as just the painting.
It really depends on what the purpose of that piece is, or what I'm trying to express, what I'm trying to really develop. Sometimes I'll just create randomly, have no purpose. Usually there's a basic vision or something that I'm trying to convey, either an emotion, a concept, a person that had touched me. I'm trying to relate something to them. And then there's the actual mediums. I don't like to be hindered. I like to explore new tools and new mediums. This piece, it has latex, oil, inks, there's crayon on it. The process was, this was one painting. I finished the painting, I put it in the washing machine, washed it. Did another painting on it when it came out, washed it again, and then came to this. And just building up, playing with different techniques.
Was it originally like the mouth and stuff, or was it completely
No,
different?
no, there was a actual person there. It was,
Like a close-up face still, or a different,
oh no, like an actual full figure.
a full
And
figure?
then the second one was a large bridge that was going across.
A large bridge?
Yeah. And then, let's see, like parts of the bridge, like this black was going all the way through.
Huh.
And then I pulled it out and it just kind of turned this.
Did you suddenly see that image in there, or just?
And the last one was just kind of, just the way the paint was sitting and how everything looked after it was washed last time. It felt like this was the direction I had to go with this particular piece.
Is there a reason you didn't traditionally stretch the canvas then?
I didn't want to.
Okay.
It seemed boring to me, you know. It's on board. I really liked how it became French at the edges and it had a very, very raw feel. And
Because you watched it, Roman, you kind of like that, how
Yeah,
it
yeah.
separated, you wanted to show that
Yeah, I was
off.
gonna say, we might wanna avoid the laundromat near you, because there could be all sorts of weird
Yeah,
paint.
be careful
paint,
with the laundromat. We're doing a whole series in this style, so.
So if the paint is still wet, that might be a problem. So what's the title of this piece? Because we talked a little bit about naming paintings the other day.
Cactus and wash.
Cactus and wash.
For the first two paintings that this was, cactus is actually, it's a measurement music that was like 15, 16, 17 years, I believe. And I was listening to a series of classical pieces while I was painting it. And I realized that I was kind of painting to the rhythm of the music I was listening to. And then wash, obviously, which wash is kind of went with it.
Now, you told me you considered sometimes the namings of your paintings actually part of the work.
Yeah.
That you enjoy naming, that you enjoy painting with names.
I know, it's, some artists are indifferent, or some artists don't really care about the name. I really enjoy, whether I'm putting a hint in to where I was with that piece, or kind of trying to convey additional information about that piece through the name. Sometimes it just mess with people. Like I had told you, I had painted this gentleman who was on the streets, and I did a painting of him, and I named the piece Ballerina in Blue, just to kind of mess with people. And
What,
it's part of the
Ballerina
fun.
in Blue? But then you also had one you named that you felt like helped provide the
Oh, yeah.
emotion of the piece too.
There's a series of paintings I've done involving this one gentleman. This gentleman, I met him on the streets. He had lost everything, lost his family, lost his home, lost his career. The man had a PhD. He was very successful, and then when the recession hit, he lost everything and just continued to go down that spiral. Didn't have drug problems, didn't drink. He was just doing what he could to get by. And one of the comments that he made to me and really stuck with me is, you know, I'm human too. And often, you know, I'll have the people who I paint often touch me or affect me in a certain manner, and a certain part of their story I'll put in the title or work into the actual piece itself. And that title, for example, is one that I use for him, and I feel the title definitely helped people connect to it, because a lot of people love the painting, but when they saw the title of the painting, they would, you'd see their face visibly change. You know, the emotional attachment just grew significantly. They had to know the story. They had to know what was going on in this painting. You know, I think obviously the work in itself should, you know, be able to stand alone, but I believe that the title is something that can be a very useful tool for an artist, personally.
Because I was telling them, I've had conversations with people about people who call their piece untitled, which you did with that one. That I know someone who said, well, the art should speak on its own, it shouldn't need a title, and then someone else who said, but I want to know what the artist was thinking when he did it. So it's an interesting thing on whether artists like titling or don't want to deal with it, and it's like, you figure it out. So I think, what's this one called? This one is called The Cover Up. So any story about, what's this one? What's the medium?
That one, I spent that is, let's see, there's oil, latex paint, there's ink, and I think fine acrylics, but largely latex and oil paint.
Is there anything you want to say, what you feel about this work, or what you
Oh,
hope
that
people see
specific
in
one
it,
is,
or what is
I
it?
spent the evening talking to an individual who was particularly unstable. So,
It was particularly unstable?
yes.
So,
yes.
and after talking to them, you painted this?
Yes, oh, while talking.
While
about
talking to
that,
them.
yeah.
So it's a little unstable feeling. And then the one behind you, what's that one called?
Let's see. It's translated from French. It's taste of berries. Real quick, I mean, it's just a girl that I came in contact with. You know, she's an art lover, and we ended up talking, and I ended up just painting her. So it was, I mean, there's not a lot of necessarily depth to that. She was just someone who I very much enjoyed her company, and we just ended up using her as a model. I spent some time doing some street art when I was up north, and I wanted to throw in a little bit of that feeling and with the background, and kind of played around with a few different concepts.
And in a typical day, you draw every day?
Every day, almost every day. Some days, I have to get up and go do other things, but typically when I wake up, I'll go out to my patio, I'll have, a cup of coffee, have a cigarette, and I'll sit there and I'll paint for a couple of, or not paint, but draw for a couple hours.
Is it like journaling or sketching for future ideas for paintings, or a
It's
little bit of
both.
everything?
I use my sketchbooks as a journal, whether I'm just, writing about, sometimes it's about dreams that I had, or different ideas I have, and what's going on in the world, and then I'll draw, and it just goes back and forth. Sometimes I'm using the words as, part of the drawing and everything like that. I start the day that way.
Do you feel like that those sketches or sketchbook, that's a real personal sort of expression? It's just sort of your morning mind dump or whatever,
Yeah.
just putting things out there.
That's how I start the day. It's, I do notice days where I don't start the day off that way, I feel a little less clear and less focused. So that's become a way to productively start the day, and I'll go from there and I'll start painting for a few hours, or whether I have to meet a client or whatever I have to do.
And if you do a sketch in that book and it becomes a painting, does it change a lot from the sketch to the painting, or does it depend on the work? Does it develop further once you?
One's painting, one's sometimes.
And how often is it a really clear idea on the sketch pad that just goes right to canvas?
It really depends on what I'm going for. Sometimes I'll have a very solid idea and I want to translate that, perfectly from drawing to a painting. Other times it'll be more like a piece like this, where the drawing was one thing, and part of the creating of that particular piece is the evolution of that, and the fact that, as artists, and a lot of us don't like to admit it, we do make mistakes. And sometimes mistakes are good, and they turn into something that was like, oh, the paint just spilled this way, and it looks amazing, and then I'll just go with it. So, it really varies.
That's, I think, kind of a a silly question, but it's like, how do you know when you're done? When you're painting something, sometimes you start overworking, so like, oh God, I've ruined it. And so you get to a place where, especially this one went through several different lives, it seems like. And then you got to this point and you felt it.
This particular one was, I was thinking about putting it through the washer. I did, but I
At this
soaked it
point.
in it, and I enjoyed the piece. But it felt like that's where it should be, and then I stopped. And as I told you in a previous meeting, that when I'm looking at a piece, there's typically two ways I know that it's finished. First off, it feels right. It feels like there's a balance, and I don't know if that comes with experience or just like the vision that I was going for. And then the second way I typically tell if a painting is finished just because I can't stand looking at it. I'm just done.
You can't think of another thing.
Yeah. Like this piece, I wanted to keep going with it, kind of pull out more realism, but I just looked at it, and I was just, I'm done with this. I can't look at this anymore. And it wasn't that I didn't like the piece, I just didn't want to continue with it.
Well, because I think it's interesting, because the hair is like, that's an underlayer of.
Oh, no, the hair was supposed to be like that. I wasn't going to do it with hair. I like
Great, yeah, it's great. You also told me that you taught yourself to work fast, just because you felt like if you wanted to make a living as an artist, you needed to be able to create quickly.
I worked years ago. I had worked with an agent for a while, and one of the things that he told me, I don't believe that necessarily what he told me, the extreme number is a little high. He told me 8 paintings a day is what you have to do to be a successful artist. I don't believe that you have to make 8 paintings a day, but really I do feel that you do need to be able to produce at a steady pace. Often, I'll do about a painting a day, but I'll also have multiple paintings I'm working on. I'll have, the painting that's more emotive, and I'm just, painting this subject or that subject. Then I'll have a piece that I'll be working on for 3-4 weeks at a time, and that will be, a 40 to 80 hour painting.
Well, it's funny, because last month I was talking, when we talked to Annie, she works on a lot of things at once, but she has to focus on one piece at a time and get it finished. And we were talking earlier, I said, there's no right or wrong answer, whatever works for you. And you feel better when you have lots of different things in process, where maybe you'll focus on one and finish it for a few hours, but there's also always other things. Because he said the other day, he'll look at a piece that's not finished, and suddenly, while it's sitting there, you kind of go,
Oh yeah.
I know what it needs. So having the different works around you.
Like you said, we all work different, wired differently. For me, myself, I like to say that, I'm a product of the ADHD generation, and, I bounce around a lot, and I'll work on 3-4 pieces at the same time. I'll spend like half an hour working on this piece, and I'll have a piece right next to it, and I'll go work on that, and then I'll look over at that one and be like, that's what I need for that, and then go back and just bounce back and forth, and just part of my personal process.
Using the ADHD to work in your favor.
Yeah.
My mind is going to bounce around, let's at least take advantage
Oh, yeah,
of it.
yeah.
Sometimes I think ADHD is just a creative brain. I think sometimes we're drugging that out of too many kids, because I think it is just creativity bouncing around in your head, and I think if we get them all to stop doing that, I don't know, I worry about that.
No, I think
Yeah.
it's possible.
So is there anything how do you feel like your work has changed or matured, or what do you have ideas right now that you'd like to try anything new, or do you?
Oh yeah, I have notebooks full of different ideas. I like I said, I don't want to be hindered. I like the freedom of just trying new things and exploring. It's part of the joy for the art with me. I use everything from syringes.
Would you ever consider selling your sketchbooks?
I would consider selling or making some sketchbooks that were for that purpose.
These are too personal.
Typically the ones I work on are very, very personal. So, there's, like I said, I also use them as journals, and they'll go into some of the more darker places, I guess, in my mind, the depression and, battling with,
I just think that's, if you ever want to, that just could
Do
be
do you know that I went to an exhibition of Picasso's sketchbooks?
Yeah.
It was the coolest thing. They just had his books, his raw, crazy sketches open in different, and I actually asked you about bringing one in tonight, because I think that, seeing the process of what later became a work and seeing the first scribble or the first idea, I find really fascinating. As you did mention that they're kind of personal, you weren't sure you were prepared to share that, but I do think the process is an interesting thing about the raw idea, the first raw idea, and where that goes.
And I actually do. I have some small sketchbooks that I carry around with me that would be a little bit less personal. I mean, there's still some with the same process, but not quite as in depth. So the smaller little moleskins that I carry around, that would be something that I'd be into.
What do you hope people get from your work or see from your work? Do you care? Do you, whatever people.
Honestly, at the end of the day, I very much enjoy the connection that I can have through my art with other people. That people can be touched emotionally or find something of themselves in that work, and that's a very, very important part of the work. But at the end of the day, my reality is I don't paint for anyone else but myself. It's a second hunger for me. It's something that I have to do. I'm not myself when I'm not creating. So if someone can have that connection with my work, find some sort of meaning, that I think the world. I think it's wonderful. But if they don't, I'm okay with that too.
You also said there's such personal expressions, but you're also okay with selling them. You don't feel like, oh, I don't want to let this go. You told me sending them off in the world is part of also the joy, that you don't really feel like they're your children that you can't let go.
Yeah.
Even though they're so personal.
I love it. Virtually every piece that I create, because no matter how bad or good the piece is, it's a reflection of where I was at that time. It's part of me. But once the piece is done, it served its purpose. I expressed whatever I needed to express at that particular moment in time. I've accomplished what I needed to. So
you can move on from it.
Yeah. So
to the next one.
if someone else can find that connection, or find beauty in that, or use it to increase the beauty of their home or their surroundings or anything in relation to that, I think that's a wonderful thing. So my personal attachment, after the piece is done, that's it.
You're done.
Yeah.
Can you tell us anything about the piece you brought that we're going to raffle off tonight? Someone will go home with this piece. What's the medium? What did you use?
Okay, there's, let's see, multiple different types of pens, inks. There's some oils, largely just acrylics and pen mostly. This actually was just, I just wanted to play around. Make a painting just completely out of lines, and I just wanted to build up, and this was just a piece that was just for fun, essentially. I enjoyed it very much. It was fun. It helped me pass the time. That's pretty much it.
It was more playing with technique.
Yeah.
It's not a particular person or a particular.
Nope. She just kind of came out of the.
Did she appear?
Yeah.
She appeared in the ink, in the paint.
she's a minor hallucination.
All right, does anybody have any questions, or is there anything else you want to say about
I think that
what you do?
I get emotional because I'm a really big fan of emotions. And to me, Roman, your emotion sits right behind your eyes right there. It's just on the verge of vomiting out at all moments, but you just hold it back enough to be normal. But that's what I think's magic about you, that it's just so raw, and it's just right there. And I kind of know your story, but it's just right there. And I can see it, and I can see it in your heart. So thank you. That touches me. You're the real, that's all. Yeah.
I have a question. I follow all of your work since the beginning, since the first time I met you. The first time I saw your work, I was like, holy shit, who's this dude? Okay? So I just follow everywhere you go. And what I see as a consistency in all of your work is that, I don't know if I'm saying this correctly, but I feel like you're kind of removed from it in the sense that I've yet to see, except for one piece that I saw, that I feel is a direct connection between your experiences in your life and your emotions. I feel like everything you create is amazing, but it's on the outside of you. Do you see what I'm saying? They're figures, they're people, they're other things. Do you have works that are?
I definitely have some works that are more personal. I have, especially the new series I mentioned. It's a lot more direct and involved with myself.
Your sketch.
Just because that's just a pattern in most artists. You look at most artists and the majority of them, I feel like we're all narcissists in a way. We're always just focusing in on ourselves, so we always incorporate ourselves or our lives or what's going on with us personally into our artwork. And I feel like every time I look at your work, there's a step back from that. Do you know what I'm saying?
For myself, it's, and like I said, I do have some pieces that are, very personal. But honestly, I find the world around me, the people that I come in contact with, the people that are in my life, whether I love them or hate them, I find them so much more interesting than what's just going on, within myself. The way I portray them is how I'm showing myself, my connection through these people. There's that concept that, I am who I am because of who you are. It's my interactions from the time I was born to present with all the people who have been in my life that have led me to who I am right now. So I feel that focusing on the people that I come in contact with and my relationship to them, whether it be chaotic or, more subtle or, that says a lot more. That's what I want to express. I don't necessarily, even though we're talking about me right now, I don't necessarily want to talk about myself. I don't think I'm that interesting. I feel like there's a huge world out there, and there's so many amazing people and so many amazing things out there, and that's what I want to focus on.
It's interesting because if you see the paintings as an external thing, and your sketchbooks are very internal, so
Yes.
somewhere there's a bridge between, or somewhere there's like, the sketchbooks you're almost afraid to expose that much of yourself to the world, but maybe that's not the right term.
That's
But
exactly
if
what
these sketchbooks are so personal that you don't want to expose that part. So
This
I just
is
have
the
to, you know
wall,
what
I
it
think,
is?
keeps
I
the
think,
emotions
I
behind.
just have to say, because I love this work. You know what is most interesting to me? I think what it is it's like, you don't talk about yourself, but you're in them. Do you know what I'm saying? Your movement, your energy, you look at them and, for me, I look at them and I feel emotion, or I feel like, erratic movement, or calmness, or finesse, or whatever. So it's like you found a way to put yourself in the paintings without talking about yourself. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm excited.
It's
Sorry.
No, it's It's always interesting to see what people see and what. Yeah.
Two-tier question. Number one, do you photograph?
Sometimes I do.
Scan them?
What do you mean?
Scan high resolution scan of the originals?
A lot of times I'll just take a picture of someone with my phone and then like I'll just draw it from my phone or paint it from my phone.
But on the originals, do you have the original scanned and then reproduce them?
Oh, the paintings? Sometimes.
And then why not? I was gonna say, why not? Because, you know, as an artist, I mean, the original goes, and you've put time, energy, emotion, feeling, all of the above, and you can say all you want, you know, you don't have a connection, you do have a connection.
Yeah.
And that connection leaves, but by scanning high resolution and reproducing it, you've always got it with you, and then you can offer that to other people, not just the one original gone.
So you're talking about making prints and like
Absolutely.
G-clays or whatever.
Absolutely.
It's something that I've been playing with and something I'm sure I'll end up
Put it in your notes, put it in your
Yeah.
journal, get it done, do a list. The other thing I was gonna mention, you brought up one point interesting, that whenever I talk to students, I've been doing it for 43 years, what I do, is I always tell them, think of it as a tree. You start at the base of the tree and you start climbing. You made one inference earlier where you spilled something, and oh gee, I like where that landed.
Yeah.
Well, when you start climbing, you're always going up, you may get onto a branch, and all of a sudden that branch has got 2 or 3 branches that you never knew existed, and it turns you
Yeah.
into a direction.
No, definitely.
And you know, it's, I've always said to people, the ability part you're born with, you know, self-taught, the ability part you're born with, you learn technique. And you enhance that with repetition, practice. Just do it.
Definitely.
Or as I've said to people, Nike, just do it.
Yeah.
And grow from that. I love your stuff.
Thank you so much. I agree very much. It's the exploring, and you know, I spend every day I paint. I try to draw every day. Most days I do, but every single day I paint, and it's about that repetition. Often trying new things. Like I use a variety of tools. Some I make myself. Sometimes I use brushes. Sometimes I'm using syringes. Sometimes a whole variety of things.
Punches, everything else.
Yeah, it just continues exploring and finding new things, and you just build off of that. So
How often does a piece totally change like this one did? From a bridge to a face to a, I mean, are you often painting over and totally changing the point of the
Sometimes,
colors?
yeah.
Just something.
Sometimes it's a good portion of the time when I do that, when I'm building up one painting on top of another painting. I'm doing it on purpose. Sometimes it's a lucky accident. It's something like the paint, you know, spills, or I had one time where I was painting and I had a large amount of paint on the brush and I hadn't screwed the easel in tight, so it actually slipped down and just made this huge just streak all the way up it, and like I really loved it. So like I started playing with that and doing different things, and so
That's where you always have to be somewhat flexible, and sort of the spirit of play has to still be in there, where it's
Oh, yeah.
like, instead of, oh crap, it's like, oh, maybe this will work.
yeah, it's exciting.
Another question. Do you turn the canvas
What's that?
upside down? Do you flip it?
Oh, yeah, work. Yeah, no, like I often work with the painting on the ground, and I'll go all the way around it, and I'll be working from different angles and trying different things, and then I'll take a picture of it with my phone, then I'll sit there and to get it like a different perspective. As I spend a lot of time like looking at other artists and studying other works, you know, just on my phone, so it kind of gives me that perspective, like I'm looking at it from someone else. And you know, I'll flip it around and look at it different ways, I'll invert it, do different things.
You know what's interesting? I just actually discovered this a couple weeks ago. Photoshop. I'm old school. We paint, we draw, we don't use a computer with
Yeah.
software. That having been said, when you scan an original and you put it in Photoshop and you go under style it'll pull down pencil drawing, brush,
Oh, yeah.
box. Interesting to see what your image looks like, how the computer interpreted it,
Right.
and then print that out. And then go from your original to that and create what you can in the middle. Interesting technique.
That is actually pretty
Something to play, you know, I always tell people, think outside the box. You know, you were a portrait artist,
good.
realism, and that's what I do. But you can't stay in that vein, you gotta think outside that box. And sometimes if we use the technology of today and let them tell us how we should think, we trick it.
Yeah.
And then you get in the middle and you're able to do something different.
Well, it's just
Totally different.
another tool to use, isn't it? Going to
Well,
Photoshop and looking
Yeah,
at.
you really, you know, I don't wanna use the tool because now you're basically copying what the computer.
Well, but I mean, you're using it to a degree.
Using it to create because now it gives me a different image
Mhm.
of my image. And now, okay, where's that in between and how far in between do I wanna go with it?
Mhm.
And play with it.
That's very
Try it, it's cool.
No, I wouldn't have
It's cool.
I like that.
Anybody else?
I have a question about the growth of my hair. You have like a wonderful sense of line, like to define your form, and I just wondered if you, like you said that that was a model, or you had that girl that you used her as a model. Like, do you do that a lot? Do you have like a lot of models where you practice like the line?
I don't know if there's any one thing that I would say
Like the
I practice
edge,
with not, but
like the
I-
edge of her face, like the contour lines.
Mhm.
I mean, I just think they're beautiful in that, and I think that's really hard to do without having repetition of like, you know, having a model and drawing lines, like drawing sort of thing. I just wondered if you did that, or was that like natural ability?
Really,
It
I
came
mean-
from the realism training too, of just.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's something that,
do
no, I had one advantage, with art that a lot of artists that I came in contact with, didn't have. Like I said, I'm not the first artist in my family. I was raised making art. As early as I can remember, I was making art. So it's something that I've always done, and always painted people, always drew people, or you know, figures, or you know, this or that. I paint a lot of people that I come in contact with. So working on one specific thing, I don't know if there's something I like relying, or I don't know if I focus on that more than anything else. It just
Yeah.
But,
I was just wondering if you work more from live models or people or photographs.
typically because I don't like to.
You don't like what?
I don't like to like deal with people. As far as when I'm creating, I don't want to tell them stop moving, stop moving.
Yeah.
Sometimes I will, but most of the time I'll have a little photo shoot, whether it's like I'll bring in a photographer or we'll actually set up a photo shoot. Other times I'm just sitting with the person, we're talking. I ask if I can paint them, then I take a few pictures with my phone. And then largely I'll work with my phone. So.
They're excited about that.
Well,
They're excited about
that
that.
was for you. Thank you. Any other questions, anybody? Are we,
No, but I do wanna remind everybody that we are raffling that off right now.
someone will go home with that tonight, someone. will.
$5 for one ticket, 3 for 10. If anybody wants to buy any last minute tickets.
It's a great piece to bring home for $10.
Hey, Roman, how many self-portraits have you ever made?
That's a
Two.
good question.
I own one of them.
Two self-portraits?
Yeah, I made my first self-portrait was when I was 13 or 14.
There you go.
And then the next one was last year in Janet bought it.
Ah.
Love it.
I want to see you do a dragon, it just brings up any old childhood stuff.
Do you ever go back? I know you said it's done, I leave it alone, like walking where you're going by some of the old stuff stacked in a corner or whatever, and you pull it up. You see something different now.
Very rarely.
Why?
Sometimes that does happen where and it's not completely uncommon really, where like I'll go back at a piece that, you know, I haven't looked at in a while, and I'm like, oh god, I should have done this. in my personal opinion, and wasting time obsessing about a single piece. Because I'll see a lot of, and I did it when I was younger, people who you'll spend 40 hours on a drawing. Keep going back, trying to make it perfect, see something else, try to fix it. But in that same amount of time, if you limited yourself to an hour drawing each time, how much better would you be by that last drawing?
Yeah, that's a good point.
The reason I bring that up is I look at the lady behind you, and I see the portrait artist, and the portrait, and the eyes always tell the story.
Yeah.
Gotta get the eyes. But then I go down to her shoulder, and I see you now.
Yeah.
I see 5 years later, 10 years later, and the reason I brought it up is pull something that you did 10 years ago, the old home,
Yeah.
and what you're doing now, and go, I'm not gonna elaborate 10 years ago, but I'm gonna add to who I am now to the
Oh,
piece.
yeah, very much. I'll often actually look at some of the old stuff or look at a different piece, and I'll use it as a learning experience. I'll see something or a technique I could have applied and made it, in my opinion, better or more powerful as a piece. But instead of going back to focusing on that particular piece, I'll keep that in mind, and it'll be good for the next one. So.
Right.
Okay. Anybody else? That was great. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
All right, anybody want any more tickets?
Thank you so much.
You want to raffle
I
tickets?
can't see
Anybody?
I can't draw it because,
Great.
I did not buy tickets, so.
because I bought tickets and everybody agreed it was okay if I won. Is that your statement?
Yes.
Everybody else?
Anybody else want a ticket?
Somebody else, great, thank you.
Everybody in the pool, is going in the pool?
actually just finished it.
I love you.
Are we ready to draw, Jenna?
Yes.